Welcome to our Playwell podcast. My name is Sherry Morgan and I am the Director of Projects at Play Scotland, the national organisation for play. Today our Chief Executive Officer, Marguerite Hunter-Blair, speaks to Diane Delaney, campaign spokesperson for the Give Them Time campaign. Diane's personal experiences and challenges in deferring her own child inspired her to join forces with parents across Scotland to create this campaign, which is firmly grounded in child and parent rights. I hope you enjoy their conversation.
Welcome, Diane Delaney, to Play Scotland's podcast. This is an auspicious day in Scotland as we have commencement on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child into Scots law. And we're delighted to have you with us today, a mum, a play champion, and an extraordinary and very successful campaigner. Welcome to the podcast. So, Diane, would you like to start and tell us how you got involved in campaigning for a change in the law, which is no mean feat?
Okay, well, just first of all to say thank you so much for having me here at this podcast. I'm absolutely delighted. So how I got involved in the campaign, I mean, I think it's fair to say that I didn't really have any sort of political or campaigning background before I got involved in the Give Them Time campaign. But really, my story started off as an individual story because my son was born premature. And I knew fairly early on that he wasn't on the exact same sort of milestone pathway as his peers when I was at play groups, the mother and toddler classes, and then when we moved on to nursery, I could see that my son just was going to need more time. I just had that sense that he was going to need more time, and I started to worry about transition to school fairly early on, I would say when he was about 3 years old. And when I was chatting to friends about starting school, there was lots of mixed information out there. It wasn't clear about what my rights were in terms of whether he could or couldn't go to school. And I was very aware of the kind of what was happening in the rest of the world, as in most children were not starting school at 4. My son should have started school at 4 because of his birthday. That was when he was going to be called to register. But I was told by one of my friends that I could defer. And so I applied to do that at my local authority. And I was just faced with so many challenges, so real negative experiences in terms of me being a parent, and my view, my voice, my opinion, my assessment of my child was really, in my view, was just dismissed and ignored. And I was basically told, nothing wrong with your child, you will send them to school, more or less. And I was absolutely devastated and heartbroken at how I was treated, but also, most importantly, that the fact that my son's kind of needs and rights weren't recognised in the process. So at that point, I was searching everywhere on the internet for information support because I still wasn't clear in my rights. And I would say I have a professional background, so even with that, and I think this is something that comes out strong for the campaign, that all parents from all backgrounds have struggled with this. And we know that even the MSPs and lots of people didn't understand the law around deferral. So I was on the internet searching. I wasn't a big social media fan, I've got to say, at that point in time, but I found Upstart Scotland on Facebook, and there was some chats going on in a thread, and I just put the question into a thread. Literally within 20 minutes, I had 50 comments from people telling me my rights. It was very clear. Of course, from Upstart Scotland, lots of people were aware of a parent's right to defer. And a few parents sent me a private message, and that's how it started. We got together in this sort of private messenger group to begin with, 5 of us, then it was 8, then it was 10. The word spread, and then all of a sudden there was chat about there's a real concern here. We were recognising across Scotland. We were all being told different things. There was all different experiences. And really that's how the campaign formed, that we just all got together and said we need to do something about this. We reached out to some organisations like yourself, Play Scotland, Upstart, Connect, and a variety of other organisations to ask them to support us. And thankfully, we received a lot of support from the outset. And I really do think that set us on the way as being credible in our campaign because we had that support.
That's fantastic. And is it fair to say, Diane, that you might have had a different experience in a different local authority? It's not that it wasn't possible, but it just wasn't a consistent approach across Scotland?
100%, absolutely. I mean, when we started to look at we submitted freedom of information requests across all local authorities, We asked for data spanning back, in the previous few years. So it was very, very clear that if I only lived, a good few miles away, that my experience would have been completely different. And that was the real heartbreak for so many of the families that we spoke to across Scotland when we get into the heart of the campaign. And that was the sense of the injustice. And I think that's what really fired us up. Do you know what I mean? That's what really, catapulted us into the campaign. That this is where the children's rights aspect came into it, because it was like, that was so unfair that where you lived and a particular characteristic of you or your child meant that you would get the funding and other children wouldn't get the funding. So, yeah.
It's frustrating because I know we've been down this journey in a number of different guises in Play Scotland. I'm thinking of way back in the day with a lot of after school provision, and it really just depended on which local authority you were in and who your inspector was, whether the children had a really good experience or whether they had a very cosseted, risk-averse experience. And I know in Play Scotland we were told several times, the play strategy will be implicit in the youth strategy. Planning for play will be implicit in community empowerment legislation. But in actual fact, unless it is explicit and it has a legal duty attached to it, it's very hard to get this consistent application across Scotland. So where are you now with the campaign? Tell us about the successes that you've had.
Okay, well, we were delighted to celebrate the new legislation on the 1st of August 2023. So we were really successful in our campaign quickly, which was unbelievable. We just could not believe that we achieved our goal basically within a year, but it took a couple of further years before the law could actually be implemented. And the government and COSLA local authorities were saying that was because the local authorities needed time to get organised and to prepare for what this meant. So now, fast forward now, we're moving into August 2024. And it is a different picture. We are so proud and probably quite emotional as well, because my experience, hopefully no parent will ever go through what I went through again. We can see from current Freedom of Information request statistics that more parents are choosing to defer school start. And we definitely see that as a positive in the sense that parents know their rights and that their financial status, their income is not a barrier to making that decision. Again, and that's the social justice issue, the children's rights issue, that parents should be able to make that decision without thinking about, can I afford it, that sort of thing. It's got to be about what's in the best interest of children. So we have achieved our campaign goal. We're so proud of that. We still, sometimes it feels surreal that we changed the law. You think, wow, we did it. I think now, although the campaign has wound down in a big way, we still, because we still have our support group running, we still have lots of people contacting us via our different social media channels and support group channels, that we still feel that we can use our platform as a campaign group to talk about children's rights and parents' rights, talk about advocacy, talk about GARFEC, and child-centred practice. And our big sort of thing just now is all about communication. We're really, really desperate to ensure that all parents know and understand their rights, their children's rights, and so that they can use that to make the best decisions about their children. So that's kind of where we are just now. So very different sort of picture now to a good few years ago. So we're just using our platform, I think, to just continue to advocate for seeing children's rights and parents' rights in action, not just talking about it. We need to see the actions. We need to see that translation in practice.
It's so interesting what you're saying, because I feel like today being such a celebratory, this is a fantastic time of incorporation of children's rights in Scotland's legal system. I felt the same when the Planning Act changes happened for play sufficiency and children's voice to participate in planning. But actually, on reflection, and I don't know if you agree with me, I feel these pieces of legislation are hard fought for, hard won, but they only get us to the starting line. I'm wondering what you think the big challenges are now for implementation of the change in the law that you've achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think the law is only one part of it, unfortunately. And as I say that as someone who's really, really proud of what I've achieved, and also really proud to see UNCRC in law and your own achievements as well. We need to celebrate those achievements because they're absolutely huge. But the issue for us in terms of the Give Them Time campaign, me as a parent, is that law only makes a difference if people understand what the law is and how to, engage with the law, what your role and rights are within the law, and also how to behold lawmakers, policymakers and decision makers to account. And I know there's lots of frustration amongst parents with families and children and young people just now, even as we celebrate UNCRC law, because there are laws in place right now. And as parents and as children, we struggle to hold these people to account. So complaining only gets you so far. And we've seen this really strongly with the Give Them Time campaign, that of course we can complain, but what does the complaint do? Often it doesn't result in the action that's required, and therefore there's lots of frustration. So there's lots of issues with the deferral funding law, potential issues with UNCRC as well, because parents in particular, children, young people, really have to know and understand their rights. Now, we know in terms of deferral legislation, not all parents and not all professionals understand the legal right to defer, and what the law says about school starting age, about how a child can and should be educated, that it's solely the parents' responsibility and decision about when and how their child is educated. And I know that because our parent support group still exists and we continue regularly, which surprises me that we still have so much contact from parents and professionals contacting us, asking us for advice, and also telling us what other people are saying. So maybe some allied health professionals, other people in the health sector, they don't understand deferral law and policy. So, and this is an issue. And I think for many parents, regardless of your background, but maybe perhaps some particular groups of parents, find it hard to challenge, to complain and to confront what they're being presented with. And I say this as a parent who had a professional background, who really, really struggled with what I faced in trying to access funding to defer my son. With that professional knowledge and background and perhaps a bit of confidence, I still really, really struggled. And it was only with the support of other parents that really were saying, no, you can do this, that I was able to go forward and challenge the local authority that were making it difficult for me. So I think that there are challenges ahead. And so I see the Give Them Time campaign platform as still having a role in championing children's rights, parents' rights, but most importantly ensuring that we help parents and children to know what their rights are. So that is a challenge, I think, now.
I'm wondering about cultural change, because sometimes I don't think we're a very child-friendly country, which is, I suppose, a juxtaposition with the position we're in now, bringing children's rights into our Scots law. So I'm thinking now, Diane, about culture change and the role of the parent's voice in being heard. Do you think that has changed?
That is a difficult one, I think, to answer right now in terms of how early on we are with the deferral campaign. But what I can see is that it's positive, because the statistics show that more parents are using their legal right to defer. And when the communication that we get through our support groups, through our social media, is that it's coming from an informed basis. It is about understanding, first of all, that it's their legal right and responsibility to make that decision for the child, but also we definitely see coming through now more of this kind of recognition of that children are young at 4 to start school, and all children are different and unique, and parents can see their own children starting to recognise, actually my child will benefit from being in an early years setting for another year rather than transition from school. So we can see that sort of thought process and the thinking around it. Thankfully, because of the law change, the parent voice is strong because there is that legislation to underpin it. So for those who know the law and understand it, there is the strength in that. I think with UNCRC and children's rights, we still have a bit to go with that. I think in terms of parents understanding UNCRC, first of all, and then also recognising that this is now embedded into Scots law. So I think within local authorities, and this is maybe where I changed the tone a bit to go a bit negative, because I can only speak from the campaign experience and all my professional experience and my personal experience as well, that there is a big gap in local authorities. We've got national legislation, and then we've got local authorities who are supposed to interpret, translate and implement that legislation. And for me, what happens on the ground, something's missing, and the parent's voice isn't strong enough consistently across Scotland and matters relating to the children. And we know this because I hear and see every day the battles that parents face and fight and the challenges and just trying to get it right for their children, trying to get that help and support. Despite all the law and policy we have, and never mind UNCRC and law, we already have so much law and policy, the Parental Involvement Act, GARFEC, the Children Young People's Act. There's a lot of legislation. UNCRC has been embraced by the UK for a long, long time too. The principles have always been there, but despite that, we've got, children's right to an education, but we know lots of children are not receiving an education. So something is going wrong locally for me personally, but for us as a campaign, when the national discussion was happening, we spoke loudly and consistently about the inability of most parents to hold local authorities to account in terms of law and policy. So for me, unfortunately, it does come down to more pieces of legislation need to be strengthened to hold local authorities to account. So for example, with education, I would say the Parental Involvement Act needs to be strengthened because as it stands just now, parents complain, and I know this from all the work that I do as a parent and a parent council, and work that I do professionally, that there are big gaps. So I think parents and children need to be right in the heart of local authorities and all community members, because you talked about the Community Empowerment Act there. I just don't see that enough. I don't see the strength of that representation, inclusion, participation, all these buzzwords that we hear in the policy documents. The reality, I don't see it, I've got to say, personally in my own life here and where I stay. But nationally, when I speak to parents and families, it needs to be better, it needs to be stronger. So hopefully with UNCRC coming into legislation, it might force local authorities have to change and bring parents and children into the centre and the heart of decision making. Because what happens, for example, in schools and nurseries or any of these sort of public authority settings is that quite often on the front line, the decision's already been made. So head teachers are implementing policy, teachers are implementing policy. The policy decision is made at the local authority committee level. So that's where we need children and families at the heart of that decision. And some local authorities that happens. But again, this is back to the postcode lottery of some local authorities have A and other local authorities have B. We don't have that sort of consistency. So quite a bit to go, I think, before we get it right in local authorities in terms of seeing legislation implemented in practice where we as the people, parents, children, community members, residents, really see the reality of our involvement and our participation in practice.
I think you're right, Diane. And I feel that today, this month of incorporation, this journey that we're on with children's rights in Scotland is hopefully a tipping point, but it's not an end point because so much needs to happen. And implementation actually isn't really about the law in the end. It's just a lever. It's about people understanding it, as you say, and all of us making it happen. Implementation is everything. And I would agree, not all parents understand it. Lots of local authority, different departments don't understand it. They don't understand what it's got to do with them. There is a lot of joined up thinking needs to happen. A lot of awareness raising needs to happen. A lot of education needs to happen. But I just feel it's exciting times. And I think the power of a campaign like your own is so motivational. I think it the rising tide that lifts all boats. It's something else that actually inspires. And your campaign was inspirational. It was very inclusive and it brought lots of people on your journey. It didn't exclude anyone. And you welcomed people with different points of view and you had to hear what they had to say so you could work out what your argument was if you didn't agree with it. So I think it was a fantastic example. I know you're back in education yourself at the moment. You're studying for a PhD. Would you like to tell us a wee bit about that?
So yes, I am a third year PhD student, and I think I've got to say the Giving Time campaign changed my life personally. and it really did push me in a different direction professionally. So I've got a background in nursing and social work, and so I've always had that kind of social justice sort of element to me already, but I really wanted to, I suppose, a change of direction. So I moved out of social work and went back to uni just in the middle of the pandemic. But I'm looking at, my research is exploring the role and value of parents and carers as they interact with professionals about their children's health, wellbeing and development. So I think people who know me and know the campaign are not surprised to see that that is the topic that I chose to explore as part of my PhD. And, obviously everything that's come before the point that I started the PhD led me to that moment. And I feel really privileged to have had the opportunity to speak to parents and carers and professionals all across Scotland. I had a good response from when I tried to recruit participants to my PhD project, and I've got a good variation of experiences and backgrounds and opinions and views that I'm just currently analysing all those findings to put forward into my thesis, hopefully towards the end of this year. But the topic of the role and value of parents and carers is a really important one when you think about UNCRC and children's rights and parents' rights, because all the policy and the legislation that we have just now points to how important parents are to a child's development, to a child's happiness, and to a child's future successes, whatever that may be. Getting it right for children has got to involve parents, and parents then have to feel valued and involved and on board for that to happen. And sadly, from the Get the Intent campaign, that wasn't the overarching experiences that parents were relaying to us. My research is indicating a mixed picture of experiences, and so for me, it's not a great picture that's coming out, because if not all parents feel valued in their role in championing, advocating and trying to bring up their children, then there's a problem. We need to get to a point, and it's like GIRFEC. Some people say, GIRFEC is not achievable. How do you get it right for every child? That's so hard. But I'm proud to be part of a country that has that bar set so high. We must say that we need to get it right for every child, even no matter how hard that is. So at the same time, I believe we must value parents as they try to bring up their children and work with them. So until we have to strive to get to that point. So my research has shown that not all parents feel valued and their role as they interact with professionals about their children's health and wellbeing.
And that's interesting, because we find that we're talking about playground access, for example. It's actually quite easy to make a playground accessible and inclusive for 80% of children. A bit more challenging for 96% of children. But actually, if we say all children, we mean 100%. And that has financial implications, infrastructure costs, but that has to be the bar, and we have to achieve that. That last 4%, that last 16%, 20%, it's every child. Those children shouldn't be at the end. They should be first and foremost in what we're thinking. So, Deanne, I'm really looking forward to hearing the results of that. Hopefully another podcast in the not too distant future. UNCRC now in Scots law. What do you think the impact will be on children's right to play?
I hope that we will see play embedded into the structures of a child's life, whether that be in the early years setting, nursery, childminders, or whether that's in school or any other place where a child is engaging with public authorities. Now, from the Give the Intent campaign, we used freedom of information requests to gather data, and that gave us a lot of credibility as a campaign as well, because it wasn't our kind of views, it was the facts that was coming, the information that was coming from the local authorities themselves. Now, from the start of our campaign, we have used freedom of information requests to get information and data from the local authorities, and we have always asked about play-based learning in schools. And I know as of right now, because I'm currently analysing data from freedom of information requests, that play-based learning is not in every single school across Scotland. And so much like many other aspects of what happens to children in Scotland, it is a postcode lottery still. Now, I've got to say, without a doubt, since the start of the campaign, there is progress. More schools are using play-based learning, but not all schools. So for me, there are issues to be addressed from the top down, so from the Scottish Government all the way down to local authorities in the joining the dots. We can't have UNCRC in law, which says children have a legal right to play, they have a legal right to education, and all the other rights that they now have, when the reality of that is a postcode lottery in terms of in schools. So what I would love to see now with UNCRC in law is play-based learning in every single school in Scotland. And I know that schools and teachers and head teachers are trying really, really hard to embed play into schools. So what we need to see for the government in terms of the joining the dots is the training for the staff. So we know that not all staff are given training in play-based learning, so they don't have that knowledge and skills and the resources. We need to look at the infrastructure in schools. Some of the barriers are about the environment and the infrastructure of schools, and also about kind of embedding that philosophy into the policy of schools. So my Freedom of Information request has asked for definitions of play-based learning and policies, and not all local authorities have that. So we do need to see the dots joined up with UNCRC in law. We've still got a bit to go, I think, with play in schools, which is why I think, and I know from parents who interact with us through the Giving Time campaign, that parents choose to defer because they know their child is guaranteed another year of play in an environment that is conducive to their children's needs.
Because of the day that's in it, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, what was your favourite play memory from when you were a child?
Oh, right, okay, let me think. My favourite play memory. And, it's funny because I've got a 10-year-old son, and, talking about what I used to do when I was a child, and some of it is quite different because we are in a different world now. And I suppose my upbringing is maybe a bit different from my son's upbringing as well. But I mean, my sister and I love to climb a tree. We love climbing a tree, and we love to see how high he could climb the tree, and then see who was brave enough to jump from the tree, which, was sure my parents were all, cover their eyes to that. But I mean, we just love climbing a tree, making a tree house. We just love trees. Where I stayed, there was lots of trees about. We would do everything. The hardest tree to climb was a tree that we wanted to climb, if you know what I mean. And then there was always this danger element of get to the top of the tree and jump, and see who could jump. Thankfully, no one ever broke a leg or an ankle or anything like that. But building dens, that sort of thing. And, just, I think being outdoors, absolutely. We were always outside because that's how you got your friends and that's how you played, because, it was being outside because that's where you met up with everyone. So, yeah, I would say, jumping from a tree with my sister and seeing who was brave enough to jump the highest is a fun memory that always stands out.
Funny, because it feels like a metaphor for the journey that you've been on, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're never going to settle with the first branch or the second branch or the third branch. You were going to get to the top of that tree and change the law if that's what it took. And that's what it took. So well done, Diane. That's lovely. And thank you so much for sharing that with us today at this really auspicious moment in our history in Scotland, where we bring United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child into Scots law. Thanks, Diane, for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this podcast. To find out more about the work of Give Them Time, see the episode information. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your preferred app. To find out more about Play Scotland, please follow us on X @PlayScotland and visit our website at playscotland.org.